Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another episode of our WCN Fluencer podcast. I'm your host, Christopher McClellan, and today my guest is one of our newest members on the Whole Care Network, Dr. Brandy Archie from Ask Sammy. But even better than that, we're just meeting each other, Dr. Brandy, and we already got something in common. We're both from the Show Me State of Missouri.
That's the Show Me State.
Yeah, so we're going to show our listeners and our guests a bunch of really cool things today that you're doing. But you're in Kansas City. I was born and raised in St. Louis, and maybe we should have met in Columbia, Missouri. So,
I met in Como.
Very much so. But we really appreciate you being a part of the network. And goodness, what you've created at Ask Sammy is just off the charts. So why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about you and your background and how you got involved in occupational therapy?
Ooh, going all the way back.
I'm going all the way back.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that too. So,
actually, I'm one of the strange birds that knew I wanted to be an occupational therapist when I was in high school because somebody came to our science class to talk about health careers. And I had been interested in being a physician. But you only go see your doctor when you're sick, and you don't get to see them when you're well or getting better. And I wanted to see that process. And so some really awesome people in high school kind of guided me towards the rehabilitation world. And then I learned about OT, and it fit my creativity. And so I've been an evangelist for occupational therapy ever since.
I love that. An evangelist for occupational therapy. That is really... I have never heard that before, but it is so true. When you find something that you love to do, it doesn't become a job.
Yeah, that's so true. It feels much more like a calling than a job. And I'm glad to be able to help improve people's everyday lives in ways that are meaningful to them. And that's what OTs do every day in all the different contexts in which we work.
And then from occupational therapy, you have really jumped in the forefront of aging in place. And I know that is a passion of yours. How did you discover that as your path from occupational therapy to this vast network of aging in place?
Yeah, so I have worked all over the country and in all of the treatment settings, pretty much that OTs do. And all of that time, I found myself either working full-time or part-time in home health, where I would see a patient in their homes, maybe right after they had a surgery or something like that, got out of the hospital. And I really enjoy seeing people in their homes because as an OT, it's our job to help people be safe and as independent as possible doing their everyday things. And what better place to do that than actually in the home where you're trying to do the thing instead of trying to make it in a hospital setting or outpatient. Sometimes that's necessary, but like doing it in the home, to me, is like the essence of it. And so the thing I kept running into is that being able to help people be more independent is sometimes dealt with by improving your body, like getting you stronger. But there's a lot more things that are not able to be improved upon physically, whether that's a change in memory or if it's a progressive disease process or even just like what normally happens to us as we get older. And so in the quest to try to help people re-engage in their activities that they want to do, I found myself looking for tools and pieces of equipment or using a phone in a different way or software or apps or just something to augment what was needed in order to, complement what they need in order to get what they want to get done. And so I had this love for gadgets and I was just running this like list in my head. I was like this encyclopedia of all the tools that are out there and, things are coming out every day, all the time. And I'd like to be able to stay up on that. And so I just found myself trying to match that love with the people who needed it the most, which happened to be the people who are the most senior in our population.
Right.
And that's how I came to be doing the two things together. I think that there's a lot of tools and cool things for kids and pediatrics, and there's also like a lot of services that we've built in to our systems in order to help with that. But as we get older, because everybody does, there's not really like a Lord willing, right? Um,
Right.
there's not really like a system in place to be like, okay, you've here at this point, you should consider doing this, this, and this. Whereas for pediatrics, it's like, okay, we know what these milestones are and you're not
Right.
hitting them. So we're going to plug you into this vertical of services. And for everything outside of that, you're kind of on your own and whoever you happen to connect with. And so that's why I felt like I could use my love of gadgets in the aging in place space, because there's so many more of us that want to stay at home as we age, and there's so many more ways to do that now with lots of tools. And so that's how I got here.
And I think one of the honors about home health care is being able to go into somebody's home. That's when you really see the story.
Yeah.
And you can, it's one thing to come to the doctor's office or go to the hospital and do the therapy, but when the therapist is able to go inside the home, you get a full picture of the good and the not so good and the challenges and how you can help. And with your expertise, I just know you've helped a tremendous amount of people just by being present in their home. Because aging in place means something different for everybody.
Yeah, that's true. I try to use my words well about that because oftentimes people think that only has to do with renovating a bathroom, but or building a ramp. But really, it means like wherever you are, whether that's 6 months in your daughter's basement because you're dealing with a hip fracture, or
Right.
if it is in your apartment and it's a senior apartment already, but you still have needs there too, or if it's the house that you've lived in for the last 40 years and you're never leaving it. Like all of those are different places and spaces, and it means different things to different people. So they need different solutions.
Right, and I think oftentimes you end up engaging with your clients at a time when they've just experienced some type of a health crisis,
Hmm.
and in most cases, it's been my experience now. When I was in the middle of this myself, when all of a sudden you're suddenly a caregiver, and
Hmm.
you're thrust into this role with very little training, and you're dealing with occupational therapists, attorneys, this whole gamut of professions that we're not often exposed to in everyday life. And all of a sudden, it's in front of us. And that's why it's so important to have a trusted resource like
Hmm.
yourself who can see beyond the shiny objects on the on the shelves.
Yeah, and like it's a ecosystem to have to navigate
Right.
that, maybe as a caregiver you do once or twice in your lifetime. And while I haven't had to be a caregiver directly for my spouse yet, um, and my parents are doing awesome, I have helped a lot of people do this multiple times, right? And so I think it's really valuable to be able to have somebody who has helped other people navigate this,
Right.
because you might have only been doing it this is your first time or maybe second time, and then that's kind of it. And so to pull from somebody else's experiences with working with multiple people, I think can help um, make the pathway a little more smooth.
Exactly, because the best information and referrals usually come from one caregiver to another.
Yeah.
And when you have that trusted source, especially as somebody that's been in your home, then you know that referral is authentic because they've trusted what you've been able to provide them, and that's one of the many reasons why I was excited to chat with you today, because not only have you taken your expertise and transmitted that to your clients, but the program that you've developed with Ask Sammy is spectacular. So talk to our listeners a little bit about Ask Sammy and how that all came about.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about how my career journey has gone through home health, and the next thing I did after that really was start a business here in Kansas City where we would send an OT to the home. outside of home health, but just specifically for home modifications. And we'd help figure out what they needed and help them get the equipment, help make sure it got installed and they got connected with all the correct services that they also needed. And that was great, but we could only reach the people we could drive to. And Kansas City actually takes up a large land area, so you could drive
Yes,
an
it
hour
does.
to city.
And
Yeah.
you get into Kansas a little bit as well.
Oh,
So,
totally. Yes. And so we were really only able to serve a smaller version of the metro area, and that didn't feel very equitable
mhm,
that some of the people who lived further out weren't able to get our eyes on the scene. And so that is what got us thinking to build Ask Sammy. And so we took our in-home process of like looking at all the things and like filtering out, okay, what are the problem areas and what solutions might work well for this problem based on what their level of ability is and also what the house is like,
right.
and then matching them with that. So we turned that into an algorithm on Ask Sammy, and that's our free on-demand assessment. So you just answer a few questions about the problems the person is having. It's made particularly for caregivers to do,
Right.
and even somebody who might not be physically present with the person, as long as you have enough information,
Hmm.
so that you could easily get the recommendations that we would make if we were in person. And so that's the whole premise behind starting Ask Sammy, and then we've added a bunch of layers on top of that to continue to have comprehensive services. So you can do the on-demand assessment if you're really motivated to do it on your own. We like to have the hand-holding of us as experienced professionals. We also offer a virtual home assessment, so we can see
Hmm.
what's going on there and then talk you through what we think would be helpful for you. And then also, if you're just on our site messing around and you have questions, it's always an OT who answers the phone. And so you can get like some point questions answered about certain things that you might see from a clinician perspective as
Right.
opposed to a random, answering service for whatever medical supply store. So yeah.
All under one website. There's so many areas of the website that I really liked, but what really stuck out to me was the on-demand assessments that you mentioned. And there's 6 different areas that people can click on to areas that are very critical in care. Vision, incontinence, using the hands and arms, memory, aging in place, and mobility. Those are all 6 very critical areas that unfortunately we often take for granted. And then as we age, I turned 66 years this year. So some of these issues that I dealt with as a caregiver, I'm looking at, oh, they kind of apply to me now. How am I going to make those decisions to age in place safely?
Yeah. And a lot of like all of our medical training tells us to look at all of the past medical history and what are the diagnoses and then deduce
Right.
a solution from there. And that can be complicated and requires medical training. That's why we go to school for a long time.
Sure.
But as a caregiver, you're likely not a medical professional and you still need to find solutions. And so, what we've learned from our experience is that it really boils down to the thing that you want to deal with. And so, let's say you're a person that you're working with or you're caring for is in a wheelchair, but that's just what it is. You already got that dealt with. But
Right.
now you notice that they're having trouble using their hands to eat. Well, you don't need a whole assessment about like mobility, and you probably already got a ramp and all that. Let's just focus
Exactly.
in on the problem today. Today's problem is we're having trouble eating. So let's just go to the hands and arms section and like see what solutions there are for that, as opposed to it being this huge, overwhelming thing of like how do I put in all this information to get back what's useful to us? And so that's why we broke it down by problem area as opposed to
Right.
having to pick like what are all the diagnoses that we're dealing with.
Exactly, because that makes it easier for the caregiver because they know my care partner, and I use the generic term care partner. I've noticed they're having trouble with their vision. What do I do? You can go to this assessment, and there's an instant solution that you can have that wasn't available when I was in the midst of caregiving, 10 years ago. So
Yeah, that's kind of like not kind of. That's definitely what the point is. Like I like to say, we're trying to democratize the education and information around aging in place. And so, where what you might have to do if you notice vision is get a doctor's appointment, get a diagnosis, figure out a problem, get scheduled with a low vision specialist,
Mhm.
and then maybe get some solutions. And that's not a bad thing. It's good to get that done, but it also just might be something more simple that could be mitigated with a particular type of magnifier,
Right.
or using a new kind of pen to write things down so you can see it more easily, because we kind of all have vision problems
We
after we
kind
turn
of,
40, right? So
this is
like
my fourth pair of glasses in 2 years. So,
exactly, and all of that does not necessarily need to be like go through the whole medical process. I just need a
right.
little something to help me see it a little easier. And so like that is the goal. That this is augmenting, adding to the tools in your tool belt to make life a little bit easier.
I like that tools in the tool belt because oftentimes when we're looking for those tools, we're frustrated because we have to go through so many hoops to get what we need. And you've pared it down to deal with the issue at hand and not have to muddy the water with 9 zillion other questions that just frustrate people while they're in the midst of care.
Exactly.
Goodness. Well, we've been talking all about work but there's got to be more to Dr. Brandy than just work. What are some of your hobbies? What do you like to do that when you're not taking care of other people?
When I'm not taking care of other people, I'm actually taking care of little people. So I have three little kids,
Wonderful.
and we love to get outside and play. And I'm a big sports fan, and so today happens to be the first day of the NFL
I was gonna say you're probably a
season.
Patrick Mahomes fan with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Listen, I've been a Chiefs fan for my whole life.
Yeah.
So way before we were any good. Um, I've gone through us being good and then bad and then really bad and then good and then great. So, I appreciate Patrick Mahomes. So we love to watch the Chiefs here, um, and spend our time outside playing basketball and participating in our community.
Well, I'm old enough to remember being from St. Louis, the Chiefs when they had Hank Stram and Len Dawson. Now that's that I'm
We
being
won our
I'm
first Super Bowl.
when they won the first Super Bowl, and I remember when Arrowhead Stadium was built, along with the beautiful baseball stadium next door, and Kansas City and St. Louis have always had this kind of friendly rivalry. Even though I won't bring up the 1985 World Series, that's something that really never happened.
Uh-huh.
But I've always enjoyed going to Kansas City. I again, like many of the people of Missouri, it is the show me state, but people in Missouri are generally friendly and easy to be around.
That's so true. And I go to St. Louis a lot, and my family lives in St. Louis. Both my parents are from St. Louis, so this is always going back and forth up I-70.
And the I-70. So when you have to ask your parents, and they'll get this, or maybe you'll know this as well. One of the phrases in St. Louis is, "Well, what high school did you go to?"
Hmm.
So, and actually, I'm going to one of my high school reunions next week
That's
in
awesome.
in Brentwood, Missouri, where I haven't been into the high school since 1976. So that should be quite an experience. But and the whole point of about this part of the conversation is that we've got to find equal balance when we're in the midst of care, because there's caring can be so intense, but we do have to have some outlets for joy and self care. And I really actually like to use the word self compassion to be
Mm,
able to say that some days I just can't do some of the things that I'd like to do, and
yep.
it's okay to say no. But when you have your day organized and you know that there's resources like Ask Sammy out there, it can help those challenging days just to be a little bit easier.
I think that's super important, and it has been a priority of mine personally to make sure that the care partners that we work with or I have worked with in the past, recognize that and you say that directly, like, yeah, you are on mission here to take care of your loved one or whoever you're working towards their care, but they can't receive that care from you if you don't care first for yourself. And that's not just like make sure you eat a good meal and get some sleep. It's also like having an outlet to do something that does not have to do anything with caregiving. Um, and and that's important time to take because if you get burnt out, then who does your partner have to rely on, right? And so it's not just about feeling selfish about taking your own time, but it's
Hmm.
also about advocating for your your care partner to be able to have their own outlets too. And
Right.
so, even within Ask Sammy, we've been made sure to include if you go like down the it's often in the memory or the aging in place pathways.
Right.
There's outlets for like, I'm worried that they're not getting enough activity. Well, here's a bunch of ways you can connect in your area for like Shepherd Center or for other community resources where they can engage in something. And while they're engaging in something, you can be engaging in something too that gives you joy and brings you more life so that you can come back to the relationship with um, joy and vigor as opposed to dread and like
Right.
fatigue. And I think we notice this with mothers of new babies. I'm biased to that because I have a 1, a 4, and a 6-year-old.
You're
And
busy. You're
yeah,
busy. Yeah.
busy, 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 busy bodies around here. And my husband's very good about making sure that I spend my own time doing something on my own self, because
Mhm.
we recognize as a society that
Right.
raising little kids is a challenge and birthing kids is a challenge, but it's a similar challenge to care for anybody. And so
Exactly.
we need to all make sure that we take that time even if it's just a little bit of time. It doesn't have to be days. It can just be a little bit of joy plugged in here and there to give you the life that you need.
Yeah, I know my listeners have always heard me say this, but it rings true again today. Set a daily intention for yourself, even if it's just 5 minutes.
Hmm.
5 minutes of me time. Yesterday, I talked to one of our other members that is doing a yoga program and said, if you just do 5 minutes of yoga, because I think what we learn, and that's why, folks like myself who have been and now almost 10 years past my caregiving experience, we stay in it as an advocate because we want to help those who will have their turn in caregiving. And one of the things that I learned late was asking for help is not a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
It's a sign of strength. And that's the one message that I always like to convey to new caregivers. And that's why it's such an honor to speak to somebody like yourself who sees the issue and is doing something about it to make caregiving just a little bit easier. So it's just awesome to be connected with you. So,
Thank you so much.
yeah. So, Dr. Brandy, let all of our listeners and viewers know how they can learn more about you and Ask Sammy. Let's get all the contact information out there.
Oh, sure. So the first and easiest thing to do is go to asksammy.com. So that's ask, SAMIE.com. And you can connect with us there in the 3 ways that I talked about with the assessment or giving us a call. Our phone number is listed there, um, or shooting us an email and to contact us. If you want to contact me directly, you can do that at Dr. Brandy at asksammy.com is my email address. So that's DR period Brandy with a Y at asksammy.com. And I'll be happy to communicate with you because I love to hear from people and also, moving this OT brain into a technology space gives us such a big playing field to be
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, I'm having this problem. What solutions do you have? I don't know, but we can figure it
We
out.
can
And I think
figure it out.
build
Yeah.
something and
Yeah.
add that to Ask Sammy. If it's beneficial for you, it's probably beneficial for somebody else. So we love to hear feedback. And also things that maybe we're not solving that you have problems with. So please do reach out.
And we'll have all of Dr. Brandy's information in the show notes below, and we'll be developing a landing page on the Whole Care Network for you and Ask Sammy here real soon. And Dr. Brandy, with all the great work that you are doing, you are certainly the WCN Fluencer, and it is just a delight to have you a part of the Whole Care Network. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.